On the eve of her wedding, Amelia Hart was forced to flee her own home, hunted by dangerous men for secrets her father had buried. These ruthless figures would stop at nothing to silence her and protect their corrupt dealings, upending her life for a legacy she never knew. But a forgotten key and her own unwavering courage unlocked the dark truth her father tried to hide. Now, discover how Amelia turned the tables to reclaim her future in this suspenseful tale of justice and redemption. The night air was thick with anticipation, the stars shimmering like diamonds against the velvet sky as Amelia Hart stood in front of the mirror, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Tomorrow was her wedding day, a day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. The delicate lace of her wedding gown draped around her, and she could almost hear the faint whispers of her friends and family, their laughter echoing in her ears. But beneath the surface of this joyous occasion lurked an unsettling feeling that she couldn't shake. As she brushed her hair, she thought about her fiancé, Jake. He was everything she had ever wanted, a kind-hearted man with a warm smile and a sense of humor that could light up even her darkest days. But tonight, as she stood alone in her childhood home, a sense of foreboding washed over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. The gentle creaking of the floorboards pulled her from her thoughts. Amelia? It was her mother, Sarah, peeking her head into the room. The worry etched on her face mirrored Amelia's own. "Hey, Mom," she replied, forcing a smile. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all evening," Sarah said, stepping into the room and wrapping her arms around her daughter. "I'm just nervous. What if I trip on my dress or forget my vows?" Amelia chuckled, trying to lighten the mood, but her mother could see through the facade. "Nerves are normal, sweetheart. Just remember, tomorrow is about love. You and Jake are meant to be together." Sarah's voice was soothing, but Amelia felt a pang of doubt. "Yeah, you're right," Amelia said, though the knot in her stomach tightened. Later that evening, as Amelia climbed into bed, she replayed the day's events in her mind, the final touches on her wedding plans, the laughter shared with her bridesmaids, and the sparkle in Jake's eyes during their last conversation. But as she closed her eyes, sleep evaded her, and the feeling of dread returned. The clock ticked softly in the background, each second stretching into an eternity. Just as she began to drift off, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, jolting her awake. Heart racing, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and tiptoed to the door. Amelia stepped into the hallway and listened intently. The house was eerily silent now, as if the crash had never happened. "Mom? Dad?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. No response. With her heart pounding in her chest, she made her way down the stairs, each step creaking beneath her weight. The living room was dimly lit, the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. As she reached the bottom, she felt a cold breeze, sending shivers down her spine. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and a figure stood silhouetted against the moonlight. "Amelia!" It was Jake, his face twisted in panic. "Jake, what happened?" She rushed to him, her heart soaring to see him but quickly plummeting as she noticed the fear in his eyes. "We need to get out of here, now," he said urgently, grabbing her hand. "What's going on?" Amelia felt a rush of adrenaline as she followed him outside. "The men, they're looking for you." "Who? Why?" Confusion swirled in her mind. "I don't know. I overheard them at the bar. They said something about you knowing too much. We have to leave." His grip on her hand tightened as they sprinted toward his car. As they reached the vehicle, Amelia turned back to look at her home one last time, the place that had held so many memories. Just then, a dark figure emerged from the shadows behind the house. "Amelia!" a voice called out, and she recognized it as her father's. "Dad!" she cried, but before she could move, Jake pulled her into the car. "Drive!" he shouted, and the engine roared to life as they sped away. The fear in his eyes mirrored her own. But as they drove further from home, a sense of safety began to wash over her. "Tell me what's happening," she urged. "I don't know all the details, but there's something they don't want you to find out. Something about the estate your family owns. They think you have information." Jake's hands trembled on the steering wheel. "What information? I don't understand." Amelia felt the world spinning around her, confusion and dread creeping in like a dark fog. "Just trust me. We need to find a place to hide until we figure this out," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Hours passed as they drove in silence, the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air. Eventually, they found an old motel on the outskirts of town, its flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow. "We can stay here for a while," Jake suggested, leading her into the lobby. The air was thick with mildew and the faint scent of stale cigarette smoke. As they checked in, Amelia's heart raced. The motel felt like a prison, its walls closing in around them. Jake paid for the room with cash, avoiding any traceable transactions. Once inside, Amelia sank onto the bed, her mind racing. What if they come for us? What if they find us? "Amelia, I promise I'll protect you," Jake said, his voice firm. But his eyes betrayed the fear he tried to mask. The night dragged on, filled with anxious whispers and the distant sounds of the world outside. They had no idea what awaited them, but as the hours passed, Amelia felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They would figure this out together. They had to. But as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Amelia knew deep down that their lives were about to change forever. Little did she know, the events of this night would weave a dark tapestry that would haunt her for years to come. And one day, a forgotten key would unlock the truth, bringing justice for all that had been lost. The motel room was dimly lit, the flickering neon sign outside casting a ghostly glow through the thin curtains. The air was stale, filled with the scent of cheap fabric softener and something more sinister, fear. Amelia sat on the edge of the unmade bed, her heart racing as she shifted her gaze between the door and Jake, who stood by the window, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Do you think they followed us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The panic that had gripped her since the crash at home was now a relentless knot in her stomach. Jake turned from the window, his expression calm, yet serious. "I don't know. We need to stay quiet for now. I'll check the door again." He moved with a quiet urgency, his muscles taut as he approached the entrance, testing the lock. The sound of the deadbolt clicking into place felt both reassuring and ominous. Amelia's thoughts raced, a whirlwind of images and emotions. The wedding dress hanging in her childhood bedroom felt like a ghost of the life she was supposed to lead. She had envisioned a day filled with laughter, love, and the promise of forever, not this, hiding in a rundown motel with shadows stalking her every thought. "Amelia," Jake's voice broke through her reverie. He leaned against the door, his hands resting lightly on the frame. "We need to figure out what's happening. Do you remember anything from earlier? Anything that could help us?" She shook her head, but the memories flooded back unbidden. Her father had seemed more distant than usual, his phone calls curt and filled with veiled references to family matters. The estate had been a topic of hushed conversations, hidden behind closed doors. She had never paid much attention, thinking the discussions were just the usual familial squabbles over money and property. But now, every fragment of recollection felt like a puzzle piece she had neglected to examine. "I remember my father was acting strange," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "He seemed worried. I thought it was just stress from the wedding planning." Jake nodded, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. "What if it's more than that? What if there's something about your family's estate that you don't know?" The thought sent a chill down her spine. "What could they want with me? I don't know anything. I've never been involved in any of it." "Then it's possible they think you do." Jake's tone was grave, cutting through the fog of her anxiety. "We need to find out what's going on, and we need to do it fast." Amelia's heart raced as the urgency of their situation settled in. They were in a fight for their lives, and she had to be strong, for herself and for Jake. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier than before. "What do we do?" "I'll check the car and see if there's any way we can get more information. There's got to be something there." He glanced back at her, his expression softening for a moment. "Just stay here and lock the door behind me." As he moved toward the exit, Amelia felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She watched him slip through the door, fear gnawing at her insides. Alone, she stood and approached the window, peering through the curtain. The motel's parking lot was empty, shadows stretching across the cracked pavement. It felt like a trap, each dark corner hiding potential threats. A sudden noise jolted her from her thoughts, a soft thud outside the door. Her heart raced as she pressed her ear against the cool wood. Silence. Another thud, more insistent this time. Her pulse quickened, and panic fluttered in her chest. "Jake?" she called, her voice trembling as she backed away from the door. No answer came, only the echo of her own fear. She glanced at the small closet in the corner of the room, a flicker of instinct urging her to hide. Just as she turned to dart toward it, the door swung open with a creak, revealing Jake standing in the frame, his expression a mix of relief and urgency. "Did you hear that?" he asked, stepping inside and quickly shutting the door behind him. He leaned against it, locking it again, his face pale. Amelia nodded, her breath hitching. "What was it?" "I don't know, but we need to move. Now." He grabbed her hand, leading her toward the small bathroom. "We can't stay here. Someone might be looking for us." The cramped space felt suffocating as they squeezed inside, the dim light casting sharp shadows on the walls. Amelia pressed her back against the cold tiles, her pulse echoing in her ears. She could hear the distant sounds of the night outside, the wind rustling through the trees, the occasional car passing by, but it all felt distant and surreal. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Jake's eyes darted around the bathroom, his mind racing. "We need a plan. If we can get to the car, we can drive away, but we should take a different route. We can't go back to your house. It's too risky." "What if they find us?" The question hung heavy in the air. The thought of being caught sent a shiver down her spine. "What if they know where we are?" "We'll be careful," he reassured her, squeezing her hand tightly. "First, we have to get out of here." With a nod, Amelia steeled herself. The weight of the unknown was heavy, but she couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Together, they crept toward the door, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the danger lurking just outside. Jake opened the door a crack, peering into the dimly lit room beyond. "All clear," he murmured, motioning for her to follow. They slipped out into the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting a sickly glow on the peeling wallpaper. As they moved, the tension hung thick in the air. Amelia felt the weight of Jake's hand on her back, guiding her forward. They navigated the narrow corridor, hearts pounding in sync, each step echoing their resolve to escape. Suddenly, a door to their left swung open, and a figure emerged, a man with shaggy hair and a worn leather jacket, his eyes scanning the hallway. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Hey!" the man shouted, his voice gruff. "What are you doing?" Jake instinctively stepped in front of Amelia, his protective instincts kicking in. "We were just—" "Get back!" the man barked, reaching for something in his pocket. The flash of metal caught Amelia's eye, and terror surged through her veins. "Run!" Jake shouted, pushing her toward the stairs at the end of the hall. They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline propelling them forward. The man's footsteps thundered behind them, a relentless reminder of their precarious situation. Amelia's heart raced as they reached the stairwell, the heavy weight of dread pushing them to flee faster. They burst through the door, the cool night air hitting them like a wave, As they stumbled into the parking lot, the moon hung low, illuminating the shadows that danced across the asphalt. Jake scanned the area, his eyes landing on their car, parked a few spaces away. "Come on," he urged, pulling her toward the vehicle. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, quickening their pace. With trembling hands, Jake fumbled for the keys, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Faster," Amelia urged, her heart pounding in her chest as she glanced over her shoulder. The man was gaining on them, his shouts fading into the night. Finally, Jake found the keys and thrust them into the lock. The door clicked open, and they both dove inside, slamming the doors shut as if that could shield them from the chaos outside. Jake turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtering to life with a growl. "Go! Go!" Amelia shouted, her eyes wide with fear. Jake pressed down on the accelerator, and the car lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement as they tore away from the motel. The shadows of the night swallowed them whole, but as they sped into the darkness, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that their nightmare was only beginning. As the motel faded into the distance, she leaned back against the seat, her mind racing. The events of the night swirled around her like a storm, and she clung to Jake's hand, a tether to the hope that they could find a way out of this mess together. But even as they drove into the unknown, Amelia could feel the weight of the secrets that lay ahead, the truth about her family, the men searching for her, and the information they believed she possessed. It all loomed like a shadow, ready to reveal itself at the worst possible moment. The sun had barely begun to rise when Amelia and Jake pulled off the highway and into the secluded parking lot of a dilapidated motel. A flickering neon sign buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow that danced over the cracked pavement. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a stark contrast to the fragrant bouquets and bright decorations that had filled Amelia's childhood home just hours earlier. Jake parked the car, his brow furrowed as he scanned the area for any sign of pursuit. "We need to be quick," he urged, his voice low and urgent. "Let's get inside and figure out our next move." Amelia nodded, heart racing as she stepped out of the car. The cool morning air wrapped around her like a shroud, and she shivered, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle on her shoulders. They had escaped the chaos of her home, but the questions that haunted her were far from answered. What had Jake meant about dangerous men? Why was she being hunted? As they approached the entrance, the motel loomed before them like a forgotten relic of better days. The peeling paint and flickering lights hinted at long-abandoned dreams, much like her own wedding plans. Jake opened the door, and a musty smell enveloped them as they stepped into the dimly lit lobby. A worn-out receptionist glanced up from behind the counter, her expression a mixture of disinterest and suspicion. "You looking for a room?" she asked, her voice gravelly and tired. "Yes, please," Jake replied, slipping a few bills onto the counter. "Just for the night." The receptionist eyed him warily before sliding a key across the counter. "Room 12, end of the hall." Amelia felt an uneasy knot form in her stomach as they walked away from the counter, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the silence. She cast a glance back at the receptionist, who had resumed her disinterested posture, her gaze fixed on the flickering television mounted in the corner. "Do you think it's safe here?" Amelia whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Jake paused, his expression thoughtful. "It's not ideal, but it's better than the alternative. We can lay low for now." They made their way down the narrow corridor, the worn carpet muffling their footsteps. Each step felt like a descent into darkness, amplifying Amelia's anxiety. She could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, punctuated by the occasional creak of the building settling. Room 12 was at the end of the hall, marked by a peeling number that seemed to reflect the state of their lives. Jake pushed the door open, and they stepped inside, the stale air thick with despair. A flickering bulb overhead cast long shadows across the small, sparsely furnished room, and Amelia couldn't shake the feeling of confinement that enveloped her. "Let's lock the door," Jake said, his voice steady as he turned the deadbolt. Amelia watched him with a mixture of admiration and worry. He was her anchor in this storm, but even he seemed tense, his hands clenching and unclenching as if fighting against the urge to protect her from an unseen threat. "We need to talk about what's happening," she said, crossing her arms as she leaned against the wall. Jake nodded, his gaze intense. "I wish I had a clear answer. All I know is that I overheard something. Some men discussing you and your family. It didn't sound good. They mentioned your father's estate." Her heart sank. "My father? But he's been gone for years. Why would anyone be looking for me now?" "Maybe there are things you don't know about your family. Secrets that could put you in danger," he replied, frustration lacing his voice. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. The thought of hidden truths lurking in her family's past was unsettling. "I need to know more. I can't just sit here and wait for something to happen." Jake moved closer, his expression softening. "I understand, but we have to be careful. If they're looking for you, we can't draw attention. We need to plan our next steps." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "Okay, but what do we do? We can't just hide forever." Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his features. "First, we need to figure out where these men are and what they want. If it's about the estate, there might be something we can do to protect you." Amelia's mind raced with possibilities. "I need to get into my father's files. There might be something there that explains all of this. He always kept everything organized." Jake's eyes lit up with determination. "That's a good idea, but we can't go back home yet. It's too risky. We'll need to find a way to contact someone who can help us." Amelia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "What about Sarah? My mother might know something. She always had a way of finding information." "Let's try to reach her then," Jake said. "But we have to do it discreetly. No phones, no traceable messages. We can't risk them intercepting anything." As they began to strategize, a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the room, freezing them in place. Amelia's breath caught in her throat, and she exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Jake. "Who is it?" Jake called, his voice low and tense. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Amelia could feel her heart race, the pounding echoing in her ears. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Open up!" a voice shouted, rough and demanding. "We know you're in there!" Panic flooded Amelia's veins. "Jake, what do we do?" He moved toward the door, his eyes scanning the room for anything they could use as a weapon. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Amelia pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She could feel the cold sweat trickling down her back as Jake approached the door. He peered through the peephole, his expression darkening. "It's them," he said quietly, stepping away from the door as the pounding continued. "We need to get out of here now." Adrenaline surged through Amelia as she glanced around the room, seeking an escape route. The window was their only option, but it was small and barred. "They'll break the door down any moment," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "Help me with this," Jake said, rushing to the window. He pushed against it, the rusty bars groaning in protest. Amelia joined him, her hands shaking as they worked together. "We can't let them catch us," she urged, the urgency in her voice growing. As they wrestled with the window, the door shook violently, sending tremors through the room. "Hurry!" Jake shouted, his voice strained with effort. With one final push, the window gave way, swinging open with a creak. "Get out!" Jake ordered, motioning for Amelia to go first. She climbed through the opening, her heart racing as she dropped onto the ground below. The gravel dug into her palms as she landed, but she barely felt the pain. "Let's go," Jake urged, following her through the window just as the door splintered under the force of their pursuers. They sprinted across the parking lot, their breath coming in desperate gasps as they ducked behind a row of broken-down cars. Amelia's heart raced, each beat echoing the urgency of their escape. She glanced back at the motel, fear clawing at her throat as she imagined the men spilling out in pursuit. "Where do we go?" she panted, looking for direction as they crouched behind the cars. "There's a wooded area behind the motel," Jake said, pointing. "We can lose them in there." Without hesitation, they dashed toward the trees, the branches reaching out like skeletal fingers as they entered the cover of the forest. The sounds of the motel faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds awakening to the morning. Amelia's mind raced with thoughts of her family, the secrets lurking in the shadows of her past. She had to uncover the truth, not just to protect herself, but to finally understand the legacy that had haunted her for so long. As they pressed deeper into the woods, the sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. With each step, a flicker of hope ignited within her. They might not have the answers yet, but together they would fight to find the truth. Amelia would not let fear dictate her life any longer. In that moment, she felt a surge of determination. The past might have cast a long shadow, but Amelia was ready to confront it head-on. Amelia and Jake stood at the edge of the woods, the darkness wrapping around them like a shroud. The distant sounds of their pursuers faded, but the pounding of Amelia's heart echoed in her ears, each thud a reminder of the danger that loomed just beyond the trees. She glanced at Jake, his brow furrowed, eyes scanning the shadows as if they might reveal the truth hidden in the night. "We need to move," he urged, his voice low but firm. "They won't stop looking for you." Amelia nodded, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The woods felt both familiar and foreign, the rustle of leaves whispering secrets as they ventured deeper into the shadows. Memories of childhood adventures in these very trees flashed through her mind, running with friends, laughter echoing through the open air. But now, fear tainted those recollections. The weight of her family's secrets pressed heavily on her chest. "Where do we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Let's find a place to hide and think," Jake replied, determination flickering in his eyes. "We can't stay out here too long. We need to find that key." "The key?" Amelia echoed, a mix of confusion and hope bubbling within her. "The one you found in your father's office," Jake reminded her, his tone urgent. "It might lead us to something, some answers." Amelia's heart raced at the thought. The key had been a forgotten relic, buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. She had felt a strange connection to it, an inexplicable pull that ignited a flicker of curiosity. What door did it unlock, and what truths lay hidden behind it? "We need to get to the estate," she said, her resolve hardening. "If we can find the key's lock, we might uncover what's really going on." "We can't just walk in," Jake cautioned. "Not with those men on our tail. We need a plan." As they navigated the underbrush, the moonlight filtered through the branches, casting silvery patches on the forest floor. Amelia took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She could feel the weight of Jake's gaze on her, a steady anchor amidst the chaos. "Do you think my father knew?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the danger? About the estate?" "I don't know," Jake replied, his tone softer now. "But we'll find out. We just need to stick together." They pressed on, their surroundings shifting from familiar childhood terrain to an eerie landscape of shadows and uncertainty. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, a reminder of the wildness lurking just beyond their reach. Amelia's mind raced, piecing together fragments of her past, trying to make sense of the present. As they reached a clearing, Jake stopped abruptly. "This looks like a good place to rest for a moment," he said, scanning the surroundings. "We can catch our breath and figure out our next move." Amelia nodded, grateful for the pause. They settled against the trunk of a massive oak, its gnarled roots sprawling like the twisted branches of their lives. The silence enveloped them, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves overhead. "What if we can't find anything?" Amelia's voice trembled as fear crept in again. What if this is all for nothing? Jake turned to her, his expression earnest. We'll find the truth, Amelia. I promise. You're stronger than you think. We just have to keep pushing forward. His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, easing the chill of doubt that lingered in her mind. She took a deep breath, focusing on the sound of her heartbeat rather than the shadows that threatened to engulf them. Okay, she said finally, determination igniting within her. Let's go back to the estate. We have to find out what my father was hiding. With renewed purpose, they continued their trek through the woods, moving swiftly and quietly. The trees whispered secrets as they passed, and every snap of a twig sent a jolt of anxiety through Amelia. She couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As they neared the edge of the forest, Amelia spotted the silhouette of her family's estate rising against the night sky. The old mansion loomed like a sentinel, its windows dark and foreboding. Memories of laughter and warmth flooded back, but they were quickly overshadowed by the fear that now accompanied her every thought. What if they're inside? Jake whispered, his breath warm against her ear. We'll have to be careful, Amelia replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety curling in her stomach. We can't let them see us. They crept towards the back of the mansion, the moonlight casting long shadows on the ground. The familiar creak of the porch steps sent a shiver down Amelia's spine as they approached the back door. It felt like stepping into a nightmare, the weight of history pressing down on her. Do you have the key? Jake asked, his eyes darting around the dimly lit space. Amelia reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against the cold metal. Yeah, I have it, she replied, her heart racing with anticipation. Let's try the back door first. If we can get in without being seen, we can search your father's office for clues. With a nod, Amelia inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, a satisfying click echoing in the silence. As she pushed the door open, a flood of memories washed over her. The scent of polished wood and aged books enveloped her, mingling with the fear that pulsed in the air. They slipped inside, the darkness swallowing them whole. The interior was shrouded in shadows, the furniture draped in dust-covered sheets that gave the house an abandoned feel. Amelia's pulse quickened as she and Jake moved cautiously through the familiar halls, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Where do we start? Jake whispered, scanning the dimly lit rooms. His office, Amelia replied, leading the way. The door had always been locked, a symbol of the secrets her father had kept. Now, it felt like the key to her past lay just beyond that barrier. As they reached the door, Amelia hesitated. What if we find something we don't want to know? She murmured. Then we face it together, Jake said, his voice steady. Gathering her courage, Amelia turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light filtering through the dusty window. As her eyes adjusted, she took in the sight. Bookshelves lined with volumes of history, a large oak desk cluttered with papers, and the unmistakable scent of musty pages. Help me look, she urged, stepping into the room. They began to sift through the disarray, searching for anything that might provide answers. Papers rustled beneath their fingers, and Amelia's mind raced as she unearthed snippets of her father's life. A letter here, a legal document there. Each piece felt heavy with implications, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Then, buried beneath a stack of old newspapers, she spotted a small, leather-bound book. She pulled it free, its cover cracked and faded. As she opened it, a sense of dread washed over her. Inside were handwritten notes, sketches, and lists, some familiar, others cryptic. Amelia, look at this, Jake said, pointing to a page filled with names, some crossed out, others circled. Do you recognize any of these? As she scanned the list, a chilling realization settled in. Among the names, one stood out, a name she had heard only in hushed conversations. I know him, she whispered, her voice trembling. He was connected to my father's business dealings, but he was also rumored to be involved in something dangerous. Jake leaned closer, his expression serious. This could be the connection we need. If he's involved, then it makes sense why they're after you. Amelia's heart raced as she flipped through the pages, uncovering more names, more connections, and a web of deceit that tangled around her family. We have to find out what this means. There's more to this story, more than we realized. Just as she spoke, a sharp noise echoed from the hallway, sending a jolt of fear through them both. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his eyes wide. Amelia nodded, her breath hitching in her throat. "We have to hide." They quickly ducked behind the desk, the heavy wood providing a temporary shield against whatever was coming. The sound grew closer, footsteps echoing in the corridor, and Amelia's mind raced with thoughts of escape. "Stay quiet," Jake murmured, his hand gripping hers tightly. As they huddled in the darkness, the tension in the air thickened. The footsteps paused just outside the door, and Amelia's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the danger they faced. She glanced at Jake, his expression calm yet tense, as they braced themselves for the unknown. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room, silhouetted against the light. Amelia held her breath, fear coursing through her veins. They had come too far to be caught now, but as the figure moved closer, her heart sank. She recognized the outline, the familiar silhouette that had haunted her dreams for years. Her father. "Amelia?" he called, his voice a mix of concern and confusion. In that moment, the world shifted. The secrets and lies that had bound them suddenly felt fragile, and hope flickered like a candle in the dark. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and uncertainty. "We need to talk." And as the shadows of the past began to unravel, Amelia knew that the answers she sought were finally within reach. The shadows in the dimly lit room stretched unnaturally as Amelia's heart raced. The familiar figure before her, though once a source of comfort, now filled her with dread. Her father's presence was a ghost from the past, a towering reminder of the secrets that had haunted her family for years. She clutched the notebook tighter, its pages whispering of betrayal and darkness. "Amelia?" her father said, his voice a mixture of surprise and concern. "What are you doing here?" Jake shifted beside her, his protective instinct flaring. He stepped slightly in front of Amelia, creating a barrier between her and her father. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in the air. Her father's brow furrowed, a hint of the authoritative figure she remembered surfacing. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." He glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to materialize from the shadows. Amelia took a deep breath, fighting the urge to retreat into her past. "You have to explain everything," she insisted, her voice trembling but firm. "We found the notebook. We know about the deals you've made." The tension in the room thickened, wrapping them in an uncomfortable silence. Her father's expression flickered, revealing a brief glimpse of vulnerability before he regained his composure. "That's not what you think," he said, his tone defensive. "I did what I had to do to protect our family." "Protect us from what?" Jake interjected, his patience wearing thin. "You've put us in danger. We were attacked last night, and it's because of whatever mess you've created." Amelia felt her pulse quicken. The weight of her father's secrets pressed down on her, suffocating. She took a step closer, her eyes searching his. "What did you get involved in? Who are you afraid of?" Her father hesitated, glancing towards the door as if the walls themselves could betray him. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There are things in this world that you're better off not knowing. I wanted to shield you from it all." "Shield?" Amelia echoed, incredulous. "You've kept me in the dark for years while you made deals with dangerous people. I deserve the truth." The room filled with an electric tension. Jake's presence at her side felt like an anchor, grounding her as she faced the man who had once been her protector. "We're not leaving until we know what's going on," he said firmly. With a resigned sigh, her father finally relented. "Fine," he muttered, rubbing a hand across his forehead. "But you need to understand, this is bigger than you or me. The family estate wasn't just a home, it was a pawn in a much larger game." Amelia's mind raced as she processed his words. "What do you mean, a pawn?" "The estate held value, connections, power," he continued, his voice thick with regret. "I was approached by individuals who offered protection in exchange for information. I thought it was harmless at first, but it spiraled out of control. The more I learned, the more I realized how deep I was in." "What kind of information?" Jake pressed, moving closer. Her father's expression darkened. "It's not just about money. There are people who would do anything to keep their secrets hidden. I tried to back out, but they wouldn't let me." Amelia felt sick. "And what about me? What did they want from me?" "They believed you knew something about your mother's past," he admitted, his eyes clouding with pain. "They thought it could lead them to something far more valuable." The mention of her mother sent a cold shiver down Amelia's spine. Memories of her mother's laughter echoed in her mind, juxtaposed with the image of a woman shrouded in mystery. "But my mother was gone before I could understand. What could I possibly know?" "Enough," her father replied, his tone urgent. "They think you hold the key to her past, and if they find you, then we need to leave," Jake interjected, his voice cutting through the tension. "We can't stay here." "No," Amelia said, shaking her head. "We need to face this. We can't keep running." Her father looked torn, caught between fear for their safety and a desire to protect her from the truth. "You don't know what you're asking. They're ruthless, Amelia. They won't hesitate to hurt you to get what they want." "I'm not afraid," Amelia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want to know the truth, even if it means facing them. I've spent too long living in fear." Jake's hand found hers, squeezing it gently. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he assured her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Amelia turned back to her father. "What do we need to do?" He took a deep breath, his demeanor shifting as he seemed to gather his thoughts. "If we're going to confront this, we need to go back to the estate. There's something there I've hidden, a safe in my office. It holds the documents that could explain everything." A surge of determination coursed through her. "Then let's go." The shadows outside the window deepened as they made their way toward the door. Amelia felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Each step toward the family estate felt like stepping into the unknown, a path laden with peril, but also the possibility of uncovering the truth. As they moved through the darkened corridors of the house, the creaking floorboards echoed their urgency. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken words and buried memories. Her father led them, casting furtive glances over his shoulder as if expecting the very shadows to come alive. Once outside, the cool night air hit Amelia's face, invigorating yet laced with the scent of impending danger. The moon hung low, casting an eerie light across the landscape. The estate loomed ahead, its dark silhouette a stark reminder of everything that had happened, everything that had been lost. They approached the front door, her heart pounding in rhythm with the echoing silence. "Stay close," her father whispered, his voice barely audible. Amelia nodded, her grip on Jake's hand tightening. Together, they entered the house that had once felt like home, but now brimmed with uncertainty. The interior was cloaked in shadows, and every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt through her. Her father led them through the familiar halls, past portraits that seemed to watch them with a knowing gaze. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the past pressing down on her like a shroud. They reached the office, and her father hesitated at the door, a flicker of fear crossing his features. "If someone is here, they'll know." "Then we move quickly," Jake urged, his voice low but firm. With a nod, her father pushed the door open, revealing the cluttered space where she had spent countless hours as a child, lost in the pages of books and the warmth of memories. Now it felt like a tomb, a place where secrets festered. Her father moved toward a wall panel, his hands trembling as he pressed a hidden latch. The panel slid open, revealing a small safe embedded deep within the wall. "This is it," he said, his voice strained. Amelia stepped closer, her breath hitching in her throat. "What's inside?" "Everything," he replied, struggling with the combination lock. "Everything we need to understand what's been happening." As the last click echoed in the stillness, the safe door swung open, revealing a trove of documents, files, photographs, and letters. The sight sent a rush of adrenaline through Amelia. This was it. The answers lay before her, waiting to be uncovered. Her father began to sift through the papers, pulling out various items with shaking hands. "I never wanted you to be involved in this," he said, his voice cracking. "But it's too late now." Amelia glanced at Jake, who stood by her side, his expression a mix of concern and unwavering support. "We can handle this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Together." Her father looked up, pain etched across his face. "What I've done, I never meant to put you in danger. I thought I was doing the right thing." Amelia took a deep breath, ready to confront the truth. "We'll figure it out. Just tell us what we need to know." As her father began to explain the tangled web of connections and deceit, the weight of her family's legacy pressed down on Amelia, but beneath it all flickered a spark of hope. She was no longer a helpless bride on the eve of her wedding. She was Amelia Hart, ready to face the darkness of her past and forge a path toward justice. The motel room felt smaller than ever, its walls closing in on Amelia as the weight of her choices settled heavily on her shoulders. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unsteady glow over the stark, peeling wallpaper. The air carried the musty scent of old carpet and stale cigarettes, a far cry from the bright, hopeful atmosphere of her wedding day just hours ago. Jake paced the small expanse, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to piece together the chaos that had overtaken their lives. Amelia sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, her fingers nervously twisting a thread of her dress. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, a reminder of the life she had almost stepped into, a life that now felt like a distant dream. "What if they find us?" she whispered, the thought clawing at her insides. Jake paused, his gaze snapping to hers. "They won't, not if we're careful." He stepped closer, his presence a steadying force against the storm of doubt swirling in her mind. "We need to focus on what we know, the key. Your father's safe." Amelia nodded, her heart racing at the thought of what they might uncover. The key had been a mystery, a piece of the puzzle that had eluded them for years. "But what if it holds something more dangerous than we realize?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if it leads to the truth about my father's dealings? What if it puts us in even more danger?" Jake knelt beside her, his eyes earnest and unwavering. "We won't know until we try. If there's anything in that safe that could help us understand what's happening, we have to go for it. We can't keep running forever, Amelia. We have to take a stand." She took a breath, her resolve hardening. Jake was right. They could not remain in this limbo of fear and uncertainty. "Okay," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "Let's go back to the mansion." The heaviness of their decision hung in the air, but a flicker of hope ignited in Amelia's chest. The mansion, with its ornate architecture and shadowy corners, had always felt like a fortress, yet now it loomed like a specter, a haunting reminder of the past. As they prepared to leave, Amelia allowed herself a moment to gather her thoughts. Outside, the night was still and oppressive, the moon a sliver of light barely penetrating the dense clouds above. The silence felt ominous, as if the world held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Jake gripped her hand tightly as they stepped outside, the chill of the night air kissing her skin. The car sat parked in the dim light of the motel's sign, its metal cold beneath her fingers as she climbed into the passenger seat. His truck had seen better days, but it was reliable and familiar, a vessel for their journey into the unknown. As Jake turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtered to life with a growl, echoing Amelia's own apprehension. "You ready for this?" he asked, glancing at her with a mix of concern and determination. "I have to be," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They drove through the quiet streets, the headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. Each mile they covered brought them closer to the mansion, yet the weight of her family's secrets loomed larger with every heartbeat. The mansion emerged from the shadows like a forgotten relic, its grand facade weathered but still imposing. As they pulled into the driveway, Amelia's heart raced. Memories flooded back, the laughter of family gatherings, the warmth of summer evenings spent on the porch, and the lingering chill of her father's stern demeanor. "This place feels different," Jake murmured, his eyes scanning the dark windows. "Like it's watching us." Amelia swallowed hard, her throat dry. "It always has." They stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching beneath their feet, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. She felt the familiar weight of dread settle in her stomach as she approached the front door, a door that had always been a barrier between her world and the secrets lurking within. With a shaky hand, she pushed it open, the creaking hinges sounding like a warning. The foyer was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and turning as if alive. "Where should we start?" Jake asked, his voice low, reverberating off the high ceilings. Amelia hesitated, glancing around the vast space. "The study," she finally said, the words slipping from her lips like a secret. It was there that her father had conducted his business, away from prying eyes and curious ears. That's where he kept the safe. They moved cautiously, the floorboards creaking underfoot, as they traversed the familiar yet eerie landscape of her childhood home. Every step felt heavy with unspoken memories, and Amelia couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening with every passing moment. When they reached the study, the door stood slightly ajar, an invitation laced with danger. Amelia pushed it open, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was just as she remembered, filled with dark wood furniture and shelves lined with books that had gathered dust over the years. In the corner, the safe loomed, a cold metallic sentinel guarding the secrets of the Hart family. "Do you remember the combination?" Jake asked, standing beside her, his presence a grounding force against the swirling anxiety. Amelia nodded slowly, her mind racing back to the countless times she had watched her father input the numbers. "It's 3159. Jake moved closer to the safe, his hand steady as he began to turn the dial. Each click echoed in the silence, a countdown to the unveiling of buried truths. Amelia's breath quickened, anticipation mingling with dread. With a final turn, the safe clicked open, the door swinging outward with a heavy groan. Inside, darkness enveloped the contents, but as Jake reached in, he pulled out a stack of papers bound with a frayed string. Amelia's heart raced as he handed her the documents. They looked old, yellowed with age, and she could barely make out the names and figures scrawled across the pages. "What's this?" she whispered, her fingers trembling as she opened the stack. "It looks like contracts," Jake replied, leaning closer to examine the contents. "And," he paused, a frown deepening on his brow. "These names, they're the same ones the men mentioned." The realization hit Amelia like a punch to the gut. "These are his deals," she breathed, scanning the pages frantically. "This is how he kept us safe. But at what cost?" Jake placed a reassuring hand on her back. "We have to keep looking. There might be something here that can help us understand what we're dealing with. As they sifted through the papers, a piece of folded parchment slipped from the stack, fluttering to the ground. Amelia picked it up, her hands shaking as she unfolded it. The ink was faded but legible. "Amelia," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. She read the words aloud, her heart racing. "To my dear Amelia, if you find this, it means the time has come for the truth to be revealed." The message seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each word laden with meaning. "I have made choices to protect you, but in doing so, I have created a web of deceit." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes as she continued, her voice trembling. "Trust no one, not even those who claim to love you. The key you possess is more than just a means to unlock a safe. It is a key to understanding your legacy, a legacy steeped in shadows." "Amelia," Jake's voice trailed off, his eyes wide with realization. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "What does that mean? What legacy?" A sudden noise echoed from the hallway, a heavy footfall that shattered the fragile silence of the moment. The reality of their situation crashed back in, urgency flooding her veins. "They're here," Jake said, his voice low and tense. "We have to go now." Amelia felt the weight of the documents clutched in her hand, a lifeline to the truth that could either save them or seal their fate. "I can't leave this behind," she insisted, her heart racing. "Take what you can," Jake urged, glancing toward the door, "but we need to move fast." With adrenaline coursing through her, Amelia stuffed the papers into her bag, her mind racing as she followed Jake out of the study. The hallway was dark, shadows flickering in the corners like specters, and the noise grew louder behind them. "Go," Jake urged, pushing her toward the front door. As they burst into the night, the cool air hit her like a splash of cold water. But there was no time to savor the freedom. They had to escape before the shadows of the past trapped them once more. "Where to now?" Jake asked, scanning the darkened landscape. "Back to the motel," Amelia said, her pulse racing. "We need to regroup and figure out our next move. We can't let them take this from us." Together, they sprinted toward the truck, every instinct screaming at them to hurry. The night was alive with the sound of their heartbeats, the echoes of their fear propelling them forward into the unknown. As they climbed into the truck, Amelia felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. The truth was within reach, and she wouldn't let anyone take it away. The shadows of her past had begun to reveal themselves, and with Jake by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The engine roared to life, and with a surge of hope, they sped away from the mansion, leaving the darkness behind, if only for a moment.